Mom, I want a vape.
So as a European and an English person, lately I've been thinking about America's political spectrum and how it is really wrong and it's really warped, and how they like to categorise all these different groups as the left and the right, and it really doesn't make any sense. So for example, in European politics and in English politics, we have, I guess, the left wing and the right wing, but there is a lot more ground in the centre. So for example, a lot of the Conservative Party in this country are centre-right, meaning that socially, I guess, they are liberal and they are more, conservative on economic policy. Now, I have made a video where I've said you can't be, fiscally conservative and socially liberal, but that's beside the point. Then you have some people in the Labour Party who are centre-left, so they're more corporatist, but they are generally for workers' rights in a sort of way. And then you have people in the actual centre, like the Liberal Democrats, who are good on some issues, again, mainly social issues, but economically they're quite conservative in a number of ways. And then you have groups like the Labour Party, which contains the actual left and contains the centre-left. So the centre-left are more like the Lib Dems, but a bit better for workers' rights and a bit better for things like, migrant rights and tackling things like racism. And the proper left is members of the Labour Party like Jeremy Corbyn and groups like the Green Party. Whereas in Britain you have the hard right, which is some members of the Tory Party and groups like the Brexit Party or UKIP, and they're more nationalist, more pro-Englishness, whatever that means, more against migration, more against pretty much everything Conservatives hate, but just not in a batshit insane way like the Republicans are in America. Now, this is a pretty standard political spectrum in European politics, and I would say it's actually the correct way to use a political spectrum because it makes sense when you tally up what these people believe and you put them on this spectrum. Whereas American politics has been completely skewed because, for example, the Democratic Party, they are corporatists, they are warmongers, they are for the wealthy. You can tell this by just the fact they haven't passed a national health service. Britain had this in 1948. Really poor countries like Cuba have one. Why can't the US have one? It's because the leftist party, the Democrats, is actually not a leftist party, it's a corporate party. Democrats are right-wing and centre-right. Where do you think Joe Manchin would be if he was in British politics? Where do you think Nancy Pelosi would be if she was in British politics? You know for a fact they would be in the Tory party, and they wouldn't even be centre-right in the Tory party. They'd be right-wing, they'd be right there with Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm not joking, they would, because the centre-right Tories, as much as I disagree with them, some are decent people. For example, the Tory MP, who used to represent my district, worked as a doctor in Gaza. Can you imagine a Republican politician who has worked as a doctor in the Gaza Strip? It just would never happen. And can you imagine someone like Nancy Pelosi working as a doctor in the Gaza Strip? Can you imagine her even going there to help with a charity when she was younger? No way. Because the Democrats are right-wing, traditional right-wing. So what does that make Republicans? Republicans are far-right. That is their real definition. They are nationalists, they are zealots, they are racist by the policies they pursue and their language and who is their leader. They are the far right. And I have no doubt in my mind, people give me a lot of shit about this poster. There's a lot of Americans in this show. I see similarities with the Americans in this show, Americans in The Handmaid's Tale, and the Republican Party today, because they're total sellouts, but they're also total racists. I'm pretty sure a lot of them would jump right into bed with the American Nazis in that show. No doubt in my mind, because that is how far right they are. And Americans need to wake up and realise the only options you have in your country are far right and right wing. That is pretty much it. Now you have people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders. They would be in the Labour Party, of course they would. But doesn't that make no sense? You have people like Bernie Sanders who would be mates of Jeremy Corbyn in British politics, alongside people with Nancy Pelosi who would be mates of Boris Johnson, and that is your example of a leftist party. And it goes to show how crazy Conservatives are, that they think the left in America comprises Nancy Pelosi and Ilhan Omar. They think that is the same thing. Whereas Nancy Pelosi has a lot more in common with Republicans than she does with the progressive side of the Democratic Party. It's why America needs more parties than the two, but of course they've worked together to squash third parties and squash third-party candidates after Ross Perot, after Ralph Nader actually threatened to destroy their bids for president, because of course Bill Clinton, I think he never won a majority of the vote because the third-party candidates were taking away so many votes from both political parties. So why don't Americans actually use proper political terms and a proper political spectrum? I feel in a lot of ways it would make many of them feel uncomfortable because they think they're principled conservatives. But you saw what happened when an American conservative went up against a British conservative. Remember Ben Shapiro getting interviewed by Andrew Neil? He called Andrew Neil a hard-right Tory who loved Margaret Thatcher. He called him a leftist because he dared question anything Ben Shapiro said. That shows you the state of the American right wing. It's not the right wing, it's not conservative, it's far-right nationalists. And you know they would do away with democracy in a second. They are letting Donald Trump and people like Mitch McConnell block everything. You know, if they could snap their fingers and be like, America is now an authoritarian regime run by the Republican Party, they would do it in a second. You can't say the same for a lot of conservatives in this country, especially centre-right ones. Of course, a lot of the people at the moment, the Boris Johnson trying to shut down Parliament supporting that, probably play into the more Trumpian playbook. But at the same time, there is limits, whereas with the Republicans, I don't think there's limits. They don't like democracy. They are the far right. And Nancy Pelosi and people like that, they're the right wing, they're traditional right wing. So that's what your politics should be. It should be Nancy Pelosi, a party run by someone like that, versus a party run by Bernie Sanders. And that's what you'd want, and maybe you'd have the Republicans there as the far right party. But because American politics is so racist, it's so skewed and everything like that, you end up with far right party and right wing party, but then you still make it seem like it's a battle between right versus left. Especially since the neoliberals took over the Democratic Party, like Bill Clinton, and the era he introduced with that, the Democratic Party had been right wing corporatists and warmongers. You can't say the same for maybe people like FDR, maybe people like, you know, Lyndon Johnson, despite them fighting wars. Obviously, on the economic and social side, they were more left-wing, especially compared to people like Bill Clinton and Obama. So this was just a quick video to give my perspective on it all and really give a quick opinion on how a European and a British person views the American political spectrum and just how crazy it is. Ben Shapiro is not conservative, Donald Trump is not conservative, Mitch McConnell is not conservative, they are the far right. Real conservatives are Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin. That is real conservatives. So you should get that in your head. If you vote Republican, you vote far right. And that is just a fact. It's not even an opinion, it's a fact. Because real political spectrums would put them on the far right. Anyway, if you like this video, please leave a like, maybe subscribe. If you want to follow me on social media, follow me at The Cavanacle on both Twitter and Instagram. If you want, check out my Patreon in the description. Thank you to all my patrons, I really appreciate it. I also have a WordPress blog and that is in the description as well. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.